I stared in disbelief as my mother-in-law's hands hovered over the shimmering gift boxes, stacked neatly on the table $20,000 worth of wedding presents from friends and family. Her lips curled into a twisted smile as she grabbed the nearest one, a fragile crystal vase, and hurled it to the floor. The shatter echoed through the room, louder than my pounding heart. "Do you think you're better than me?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "This marriage will never last, not while I'm here." I froze, unable to process the chaos unraveling before my eyes. The woman I'd trusted with my new family was standing there, determined to ruin everything. But what she didn't know was that I had already uncovered her darkest secret, and it was time for her to pay. Growing up, I was always the kind of person who believed in the power of family. My parents weren't wealthy, but they ensured I understood the value of love, respect, and hard work. So when I met Ethan, my husband, I felt like I had hit the jackpot. He was kind and ambitious, and most importantly, he understood the importance of family just as much as I did. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but we built a life filled with laughter, late-night talks, and dreams of a future together. When he proposed to me on a quiet beach at sunset, I cried joyfully. We couldn't wait to start our lives as husband and wife. Ethan's mother, Sharon, welcomed me warmly at first, or so I thought. She was elegant, outspoken, and seemed to dote on Ethan in a way only a proud mother could. She called me the daughter she never had and insisted on helping with every aspect of the wedding. At first, I thought her involvement was sweet, maybe even endearing. Sharon had strong opinions about the guest list, the flower arrangements, and even the catering, but I didn't mind. I wanted to keep the peace. After all, she was family now. Little did I know, her kind words masked something darker, something that would threaten to tear my world apart. It all started subtly. Little things I brushed off as quirks or misunderstandings. Sharon would accidentally forget to include my name in family invitations, or she'd make snide remarks about my choice of career as a freelance designer. She'd say things like, "Ethan works so hard to provide, doesn't he? It must be stressful, being the sole breadwinner." At first, I laughed it off. Sharon was traditional, I told myself. Maybe she didn't understand how much I contributed behind the scenes. Ethan reassured me, saying, "Don't take it personally. She just wants to feel important." But as the wedding planning progressed, her behavior became harder to ignore. One afternoon, while I was finalizing the guest list, Sharon stormed into the room, her face red with frustration. "Why isn't the Henderson family invited? They've been friends with us for years." I explained, as calmly as I could, that we had limited space and needed to prioritize close friends and family. But Sharon wasn't having it. "You're cutting out people who matter to us. This is my son's wedding too." Her words stung, but I stood my ground. It was our wedding, not hers. Ethan tried to mediate, but every disagreement seemed to drive a wedge between us. Sharon's veneer of warmth was slipping, revealing a controlling and manipulative side that I hadn't noticed before. Then came the incident with the dress. I'd fallen in love with a beautiful lace gown during one of my fittings. Sharon had insisted on tagging along, despite my hesitation. The moment she saw the dress, she frowned. "Are you sure this is the one? It's nice, but it doesn't exactly scream wow, does it?" Her words planted a seed of doubt. That evening, when I came back to the bridal shop for a final fitting, the seamstress looked puzzled. "Your mother-in-law called earlier. She said you wanted the alterations changed." What, my voice cracked. Sharon had tampered with my wedding dress without even telling me. Furious, I confronted her, but she played innocent. I thought I was helping. I only wanted it to fit better. "You should be thanking me." From that point on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sharon was sabotaging me. Things escalated when the gifts began arriving. Our friends and family were incredibly generous, sending everything from cash to heirlooms to help us start our new life. Ethan and I decided to keep the gifts in his parents' house for safekeeping until the wedding day. One afternoon, I stopped by unannounced to check on them. As I walked into the guest room, I saw Sharon sifting through the gifts. She held up a sleek, black envelope addressed to me and Ethan, her expression one of disdain. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't even flinch. "These are far too extravagant. People are wasting their money. It's obscene." Before I could respond, she dropped the envelope onto a growing pile of unnecessary items she had apparently decided to return. I was horrified. "You can't do this. These aren't your gifts to decide on." Her response was chilling. "This is my family's home, and I won't let this wedding turn into a spectacle." When I told Ethan, he tried to downplay it. "She probably thought she was helping," he said. I could see the guilt in his eyes. Sharon had always had a strong grip on him, but the final straw came a week before the wedding. I overheard Sharon on a phone call while I was visiting to discuss seating arrangements. Her voice was hushed but filled with venom. "She thinks she's so perfect. I've seen girls like her before they latch on to successful men and bleed them dry." I froze, anger and hurt bubbling inside me. She was talking about me. Ethan deserves better, she continued. I've got a plan to show him what kind of woman she really is. My chest tightened as I stepped back, desperate to keep my presence hidden. Sharon wasn't just meddling, she was plotting to destroy our marriage before it even began. I knew I couldn't confront her outright. She was too clever, too practiced in playing the victim. Instead, I decided to fight back, but I needed proof. That evening, I confided in my best friend, Lily, who had always been my rock. You need to record her, Lily said firmly. If Ethan hears what she's really like, he'll finally see the truth. It felt wrong, but I couldn't see another way. The next day, I placed a small recording device in the guest room where Sharon often made her calls. The results were worse than I could have imagined. Sharon had been calling vendors to cancel arrangements behind my back. She told the florist to switch the bouquets I'd chosen, claiming I'd changed my mind. She tried to cancel the live band we'd hired, saying we couldn't afford it. She even contacted my childhood friend, one of my bridesmaids, to spread lies about me being a gold digger. Listening to the recordings felt like a punch to the gut. But the most damning evidence came in a call she made to one of her friends. She won't last a year, Sharon sneered. Once Ethan sees her for who she is, I'll make sure this marriage ends. And when it does, I'll be here to pick up the pieces. My hands shook as I replayed the clip. It was all there, her hatred, her manipulations, her plan to ruin everything I'd worked for. That night, I showed Ethan the recordings. His face turned pale as he listened, his jaw tightening with every word. When the final clip ended, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. I had no idea, he whispered. I'm so sorry. For the first time, Ethan saw his mother for who she truly was. But instead of confronting her immediately, we decided to wait. We needed a plan, one that would ensure she couldn't weasel her way out of this. I had no idea just how far she'd go to stop our wedding. The wedding day arrived, a blend of nerves and determination coursing through me. Despite everything, I had refused to let Sharon destroy this day. Ethan and I had a plan, a carefully crafted one that would expose her schemes in front of everyone. As guests began arriving, Sharon appeared in a stunning emerald gown, a little too extravagant for the mother of the groom. She smiled warmly at everyone, playing the gracious host, but her eyes gleamed with something darker. The ceremony went off beautifully. I felt a surge of triumph as Ethan and I exchanged vows, our love standing firm against the storm Sharon had tried to create. But the real showdown was yet to come. At the reception, the moment arrived. Ethan took the mic to thank everyone for being part of our special day. Today is a celebration of love and family, he began, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of tension only I could detect. But it's also a day of truth. The room quieted. Sharon, standing near the front, tilted her head, her smile faltering just slightly. Someone close to us, Ethan continued, has tried to sabotage this wedding. Someone we trusted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as he gestured toward a nearby screen. We wanted everyone to know the truth. I pressed play on a hidden remote, and the room was filled with Sharon's voice. She won't last a year. Once Ethan sees her for who she is, I'll make sure this marriage ends. Gasps filled the air. Sharon's face turned ashen as clip after clip revealed her schemes, canceling vendors, mocking me, spreading lies. The carefully constructed facade she'd built crumbled in real time. Stop this, she screeched, her mask of composure finally breaking. She stormed toward Ethan, who held his ground. Why, he demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Why would you do this to us? I was protecting you, she cried. She's not right for you. She's using you. No, Ethan said firmly, his voice echoing through the room. You weren't protecting me. You were trying to control me. This isn't love, Mom. This is manipulation. The room was silent, all eyes on Sharon. For the first time, she looked small-cornered, exposed. But I wasn't done. I stepped forward, my voice steady. I trusted you. I welcomed you into our lives and you tried to tear us apart. But you failed. The final twist came as Ethan addressed the room. This isn't the first time she's done something like this, he revealed. Over the years, she's meddled in my relationships, driven people away. But today it stops. Sharon's eyes widened in shock. Ethan, you don't mean that. I do, he interrupted. Until you can take accountability and show genuine change, you're not welcome in our lives. We deserve peace. The crowd watched as Sharon stumbled back, her world unraveling. For years, she had wielded control, using guilt and manipulation as her weapons. But now her power was gone. She left the reception in silence, her presence no longer a shadow over our happiness. And as I looked around the room at the friends and family who stood by us, I felt a profound sense of triumph. The day had begun with tension, but it ended with a love stronger than ever and a family built on trust, not fear. Sharon's reign was over and we had reclaimed our story. The aftermath of that night felt like the settling of a storm, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. As Ethan and I stood there, holding hands, the weight of everything that had transpired finally began to sink in. I could hear the hum of voices and the soft clinking of glasses, but they all felt distant, as if I were floating above it all. Sharon had left in a whirlwind of anger, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The guests were in shock, but they stood by us, offering support and understanding. What had begun as an intense confrontation soon became a reaffirmation of our love, our ability to stand united against the forces trying to tear us apart. Ethan and I spent the next few days in a haze, both overwhelmed and relieved. The wedding had been a success, yes, but it didn't feel like the end of the battle. In many ways, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. As the dust settled, I found myself reflecting on everything I had gone through. At first, the feeling of revenge had burned brightly within me. I had wanted to expose Sharon for the manipulative, cruel woman she was. I wanted her to suffer the way she had made me suffer. But now, looking back, the sense of justice I had fought for didn't taste quite as sweet as I had imagined. There was a deep sense of closure that came with watching her unravel, hearing her screams as she realized that everything she had worked for, the control, the secrecy, the manipulation, was no longer in her grasp. And yet, a part of me couldn't help but feel sad. Sharon was broken, and I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. The night of the wedding had been a powerful turning point, but the weeks that followed were filled with quiet contemplation. I realized that, in my pursuit of revenge, I had lost sight of something crucial. Sharon wasn't the only one responsible for the damage. I, too, had contributed to the tension by allowing her to infiltrate our lives in the first place. I had been passive, letting her dictate too much, believing that the peace we shared was more important than standing up for myself. When Ethan and I finally sat down to talk about everything, about Sharon, about us, about our future, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had always prided myself on being strong, on taking charge of my life, but in this situation, I had been swept along by the current. I realized that, in confronting Sharon, I had also confronted parts of myself that I had overlooked. "I'm sorry," I told Ethan one evening as we sat in our living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows across the room. "I should have spoken up sooner. I shouldn't have let her control so much of our lives." Ethan took my hand, his expression softening. "It's not your fault. She's been like that for as long as I can remember. I just couldn't see it until now." We were both guilty of not seeing the truth. But in that moment, something shifted. We were no longer fighting against each other. We were fighting for each other. The final nail in Sharon's coffin came a few weeks after the wedding. Ethan received a letter from her, a letter that had been written in haste, laced with emotion and regret. In it, she apologized for her actions, though her words felt empty and rehearsed. She claimed that she was misunderstood and that she had only wanted what was best for him. But what struck me the most was the final sentence. "I'll always be your mother, but I've learned I can't control everything." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from her. But it wasn't enough. We both agreed that it was best to leave the past behind. Sharon's letter didn't change anything. She had shown her true colors, and no amount of words could erase what she had done. Ethan and I took a step back from her. We stopped answering her calls, and slowly she faded from our lives. There was no dramatic confrontation or showdown, but I knew that she would never be a part of our future again. In the months that followed, I noticed something incredible. I had changed. For the first time in a long while, I felt free, not just from Sharon, but from my fears. The betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also forced me to face the truth about myself and my relationship with Ethan. I was no longer the passive woman I had been, afraid to rock the boat or to challenge the authority of others. I had learned the hard way that peace isn't worth much if it's built on silence. Our marriage grew stronger. Ethan and I learned to communicate better and to trust one another without the fear of outside interference. We built a life that was truly ours, one based on respect, equality, and a shared vision for the future. But even with the healing, there was a quiet emptiness that lingered in the background. I had won. We had won. Sharon's reign of manipulation and control had ended, but in the space that was left behind, there was a sense of bittersweet relief. Sharon's absence had made room for something new, but it hadn't filled the hole that had been left in my heart. The hurt of betrayal is a heavy burden to carry, and while I had found closure, I knew the scars would remain. We never heard from Sharon again. No calls, no visits. She had retreated into her own life, taking her bitterness and her brokenness with her. And while it was tempting to think that she had learned her lesson, a part of me knew she hadn't. People like Sharon rarely change. But for us, we had learned something too about love, trust, and the strength we had when we faced adversity together. It wasn't the easy way, but it was the right way. As I looked at Ethan, my heart swelled with love. We had made it through the storm. And though the winds had been fierce, the love we had for each other was the anchor that kept us grounded. The road ahead would have its challenges, but we were ready. Together, we faced the darkness, and together we would step into the light. In the end, this story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your power and learning the hard lessons that life throws your way. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can feel like a wound that never fully heals. But through it all, we learn to stand up for ourselves, to fight for the ones we love, and to find strength in the darkest of moments. Have you ever had to confront betrayal in your life? How did you handle it? Let us know your thoughts and share your own stories in the comments below. And if you've learned something from this journey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping, emotional stories like this one. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply finding peace and moving forward.